You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons and those who I feel are the next generation icons of the weddings and event industry, all to provide you with education and inspiration. And I am still feeling very inspired because I actually got married on November 26th, the day after Thanksgiving. It was a nice, small, intimate gathering. Basically had parents and siblings and kids, so there was only about 15 of us, and it was just such a special, special time. I'm going to have a bigger party for about 60 people or so next May, and I'll be talking more about my planning for that as time goes on. So anyway, if you missed last week's episode, it was with Meg Smith of Meg Smith Photography, who has photographed numerous celebrity weddings. That was a really good interview. Be sure to check it out if you missed it. And today, our special guest is AJ Williams. AJ is the founder and executive producer with AJ Events based in Boston. She has been named BizBash's top event producer of the year, also the BizBash 500 most influential event professionals list, Boston Business Journal's area's top meeting and event planning companies every year since 2003, Boston Herald's top 10 event planners, and more. So enjoy this conversation with AJ Williams. Well, hey, AJ, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Julie Novak, CEO of Party Slate, for introducing us. She's been on the show several times, and most notably for those listening in episode 121 and 373. She's great. How do you know her?
Oh, she's amazing. And I am a huge fan and friend of Julie. And I'm so impressed with everything that she's done for our event industry. Love, love, love Party Slate. If you're not on it, you should be.
Yeah, definitely. So AJ, I know that you went to the Massachusetts College of Art, and you then worked in publishing, catering, fashion, and eventually marketing before launching your company. But I'm just curious, when you were growing up, did you have any passion at all for event design? I mean, how did it manifest if it did?
I was always throwing parties. My high school yearbook dubs me as Julie McCoy from The Love Boat.
That's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, parties are my thing, part of my character.
Yeah. Well, so when you went to the Massachusetts College of Art, I mean, what is it that you majored in exactly? What did you want to do at that time?
So I was on scholarship for fashion, actually, and they had a really small fashion department, and it wasn't competitive enough for me. So I switched over to graphic design and fell in love with it.
Wow. Well, then how did you make the switch over? I mean, like I said, I know you worked in other fields and kind of in different industries until you finally launched AJ Events. How did you get to the point of making that transition over to your own company?
Sure. So while I was in college, I was already in the event industry, working for the Miss Universe system, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA for 4 New England states. And while I was in college, and then continued working on events after. Then I left 8 years after working for them, and after working for a publishing magazine in the Boston area, I had an epiphany after 9/11 and started my own company.
What was that epiphany?
Well, I just thought when it comes to even now during COVID, when you're faced with world events and tragedies, you actually take a step back and reassess. And that's what I did. And I knew that I wanted to go out on my own and plan events.
It's interesting because like you mentioned, I mean, during COVID, I just read an article again last night about all these people who are leaving their jobs, because they realized what's really important and they want to do things that are feeding their heart more.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in our industry, we see a lot of people that are leaving and that are new faces that are coming on board. And, people want to come into the industry because they love, the energy and the glamour of events, all things events, of course, and the design and what have you. But, there are others that are also leaving because, it's been taxing on time and on themselves. So they've gone on to do other things. But, I think people that will succeed in the event industry are resilient and really have a true passion and love for the industry.
Well, did you start working on your company while you had a job, or did you just make a clean break and then go for it?
So I was working for a celebrity chef, a restaurant in Boston, and I was managing their PDR, their private dining room, working in events every day. We had events every day in the restaurant. And my thing, I always like to do things differently. If anyone knows me, they know that. And I always brought different events to the restaurant, buyouts and the theater. I worked very closely with the theaters to do their, post parties for any of their productions. And it ended up being like a press-worthy, asset for the restaurant. So I really just loved like creating new experiences, when I was working for Ambrosia and Huntington. And then after 9/11, I had that epiphany and I said, I really want to just move out on my own, plan events, I started out with social parties and bar and bar mitzvahs, weddings, and then subleased my office with an organization that were political lobbyists, and they taught me fundraising and fell in love with fundraising and that industry and nonprofits very much so that I stopped doing weddings for a while, but then. After I succeeded with nonprofits, slowly started doing weddings again because that, I love the design and I just love the wedding industry on a whole.
Yeah. Well, I, looked through your website among other places and I saw a quote that I really liked seeing, and that is, creating energy is a big part of my success. I give my clients event strategy, smart events. There's a formula involved and I've perfected it. Now, AJ, I'm going to ask you what that formula is.
Well, sure. I mean, we've had, I can answer it in a couple ways. We developed a formula for COVID events and hybrid events that really made us successful last year during the pandemic. And then when you have a foundation for your event, you expand on that and then create these different components to add energy to the event. So when you perfect the foundation for your event and you know what works well, like for our nonprofit events pre and post COVID, we know the formula that works for fundraising during the event. There is a strategy involved, but once you perfect that foundation for our nonprofit events, for our fundraising on site, we know it works for increasing and raising, doubling, tripling dollars that client would not normally see the revenue from. We just have that particular formula. We know it works, and that's why we use it. So,
see, I love how you're talking about that. I mean, basically maximizing ROI for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, fundraisers, corporate events, that kind of thing. Well, I'm going to want to come back to that in just a few minutes, but I first want to ask about when it comes to weddings. I mean, what is your process from when you first meet a wedding client? What does that look like? How do you, if you're able to take me through that would be interesting.
Sure. So when we're onboarding our bridal clients, we sit down with them and take them through our process of what the next process is going to look like. So if they're getting married in a year, we take them through what that year is going to look like. So we show them our design boards, samples of the design boards, samples of our invitations if they have not seen that already. We show them, we even show that again, actually, just so they can understand the process of receiving their Pinterest accounts and then taking that and how we implement that into their design boards. And then letting them know based on the time of the event, from when we start the project, what the timeline is going to be, and then setting expectations for the client and bride relationship. So that's basically what we do when we onboard our clients first. And then we give them we let them know what they need to do on their end. And that really is first and foremost, making sure that their mailing lists are as up to date as possible. So when we're ready, we have the files that we need. So it's basically setting both of us up for success during the process.
I know that you also produce a lot of major galas, and I'm wondering if there's any overlap between those, like your approach for a gala and your approach for a wedding. They're vastly different, but then on the other hand, there's similarities, right?
Yeah, the onboarding is almost quite similar, but the process is very, very different because when it comes to nonprofit events, we're very much strategy focused. We're about raising dollars, and we design all of the artwork and the sponsor kits, and we talk to them about their assets. So we basically collect a lot of information and then approve content so we can move forward with our process with fundraising, because we kind of like work together as a team. We design, we implement the materials. And then if we're working with the development team or the committee or the board or all of the above, we give them the strategies and the tools and the resources to make them successful. So we're all working together to raise more dollars for that particular cause. Then we get into that. Okay, here's what your event's going to look like. As far as design, we already know the scope of the event at that point, but here's what the design of the event is going to look like and the experience that your attendees will visually experience.
It's interesting earlier. Again, you talked about strategy, which is not necessarily a word that's used exactly like that on the wedding side, but for the galas, and again, especially these fundraisers, when you talk about finding out what their assets are, I take that as, what are the elements of their brand, right? Is that pretty much what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's quite a few things. The assets could be, what is it about the event or what the cause is that we can use as assets, or the venue could be an asset that could change the sponsor levels, So that's a deep conversation with the client when it comes to assets. But I do use strategy with our bridal clients, to our wedding clients as well, because it's all about the experience. So there's a strategy involved in that as well. We want to make sure that we tease our attendees right from the beginning with the save the date. And then we make sure that we tease them again with what's yet to come with the invitation. So that's the strategy that we use. We want to make sure that we're creating the energy really fast early on. So when they're coming on site, it's even more enhanced with what they are experiencing throughout the event.
Yeah. Also, I know you do this in-house, don't you? You've got your own graphic design, your own everything, from what I understand. Is that right? Pretty much all in-house?
Yes. So we handle all of the event design in-house. We handle some components of the floral design as well and execute it. We execute the graphic design as well, and the fundraising in-house.
Yeah. And don't you also work with a lot of celebrities? Like I read you worked with Jennifer Hudson, Earth, Wind and Fire, Queen Latifah, President Bill Clinton, the Eagles. So many more.
Absolutely.
What is that like? That's a whole different ballgame, is to deal with national artists.
Yes. So wrangling is what it's called. And basically handling all the details for their rider and ensuring that everything is put into place and well executed, especially for, let's say, a large band like the Roots or Earth, Wind and Fire. We put someone on to wrangle that particular headliner all to itself. Or if there is an artist like Jennifer Hudson or the Eagles, or a very, very high profile celebrity that really needs attention, its own event planning.
Yeah, it is.
Because we work with vendors to handle their flights and ground transportation and all the components that we need to execute for their rider.
Yeah, of which can be like 25 pages long, that kind of a rider.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I did an event. I've got a band company. We do weddings, corporate parties, but we had brought out one of our top bands, and afterward the headliner was Earth, Wind, and Fire, and that took an
Oh my gosh.
an enormous amount. And we had to build a stage over a fountain on a sloped lawn of this major location in Washington, D.C. It was really over the top. And I ended up, even though, my thing is music, I ended up hiring an entertainment producer who really has that skill set of dealing at that level. Is that when you say you bring in outside vendors, is that what you do also?
Yeah. So we hired a stage handler, stage producer to handle just the entertainment. And then we had a few people working just with Earth, Wind, and Fire for our event. And we had the same similar setup when we had Earth, Wind, and Fire. So a hard, complicated setup on top of working with them was definitely challenging, but it was, one of my best events.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They, for a long time, they were the number one corporate band, like for decades. I remember that, What about the pressure though, AJ, with these kinds of events that you do? I mean, whether or not there's a celebrity, talking about these, especially major galas, do you feel anxiety or fear over it, like personally?
Always. I always have anxiety and fear. And I think that's what keeps me on my toes for the details. So if I'm not nervous before an event, I would say 3 weeks leading up to the event, that's when I'm like, wait a second, everything is already in place. And then I just go and, triple, quadruple check everything. But I love that high, I guess.
Right. It's like an adrenaline kind of thing, isn't it? People call me an adrenaline junkie. I'm like, well, okay, I guess so.
Yes. And other people call it stress.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do love that. So.
Yeah. Do you have any techniques, like personally, that you use just to help keep yourself grounded during these, before and during these events?
It's really lists. Lists are like.
Yeah, I hear you.
And my calendar and the calendar reminders, that's really what keeps, and my team. I cannot say I'm nothing without my team. So they're amazing, and I appreciate all of them for being my backbone for events.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about, lists and calendar and reminders. I completely resonate with this. If I am insanely organized, and if I'm not, I cannot sit. I just can't handle the stress that comes with it unless I'm insanely organized. And that's how I personally relax, is in that way too.
Right. Absolutely.
I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So, if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to theweddingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's theweddingbiznetwork.com. What are some of the hardest parts about what you do as an entrepreneur with all these different kinds of events? I mean, other than what we just spoke about, is there anything else that you kind of struggle with on a regular basis or just recently?
Right now, the event that I was telling you about with Earth, Wind, and Fire, that was a one-off event for a memorial that's being built in Boston, but they're having their unveiling, and we just got rehired to work with them on a 2-year project. So that event is going to be insane as well. So we had to, come up with something innovative for that project. But now finding more event planners, we've already started that process a month ago. And, finding a good person is hard. Finding staff is challenging right now. And I know that time will eventually pass, but that's what I'm struggling with right now, is finding two good planners to add to the team.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I'm hearing across the board especially since COVID. Again, it's like what we spoke about earlier. People are making a lot of changes in their lives and really wanting to, if they can, find something that feeds them more personally. And so there's so much more demanding. I don't mean in a negative way, but just the expectations are higher for people who are looking for new jobs. And so I understand that that's a challenge. While we're on the business side of it, I wanted to ask you about that too. Clearly you are a super creative person. In order to have this business of yours be successful, you had to deal with the business side of it, not just the creative side. How do you kind of resolve that struggle, in a sense, inner struggle between business and art, to balance the two? How do you look at that?
I just know I always want to be successful. And, that drives me to look at both the business side and the design side for the business. And, especially after coming off of the beginning of 2020, I knew I didn't want to furlough anyone, and I wanted to keep my staff employed. And we did just that. We didn't furlough not one person.
Wow.
And we basically, survived because of our nonprofit clients. And
right.
I contacted all of them and had, those conversations with them and basically told them that we needed to move forward and continue. We still didn't know, if this was going to pass. And if it didn't, they still needed to raise money. Right.
Right. So
we had a flexible scope of project. We knew we were still going to be, we're all hands on deck. I basically let them all know whether the event was going to move forward or not. We were going to still be raising dollars for them. And in the end, for all of them, we, except for one, we had all hybrid events of up to 25 attendees. And, we delivered the parties in the box with a 3-course meal and wine or cocktails to their doors. And some of them were all over the country. We delivered and shipped items to. And we had one event that was a fundraiser that was fully virtual, but it was still a live broadcast. And this is what I mean about always wanting to do things differently. I knew that a pre-recorded event wasn't going to raise additional dollars on site. So it raises dollars on site, but it wasn't going to raise it the way I wanted to raise dollars.
Yeah.
And we were the one of very few that still conducted the event as if we were still, pre-COVID. So we had a live broadcast event with a live auction. We sold live auction packages. We had a fund a need. We had our honoree. It was still the same setup. The only difference is we were broadcasting it to your home, and we had a small audience in the studio for up to 25 last fall. But we produced 18 of those and killed it.
Well, it sounds like from what you're saying, they were interactive too.
Very interactive, yes.
Isn't that the key? It's especially I've had so many Zooms now, right? These kinds of meetings and events too, and it's so hard to feel engaged unless they build in an interactive element to it.
Absolutely. We sent pom-pom streamers to them and their parties in the boxes so they could show their support and show energy rather than typing in a chat.
Right.
So
right.
That's how we created energy there.
Also, Julie Novak had mentioned that you're it when it comes to galas in Boston. And I'm wondering, I used to live in Boston. It is a major market. Was there a marketing strategy? Like how do you feel? Obviously you do great events, and so there's going to be referrals and word of mouth. Did you also have any kind of a marketing strategy to help, build your reputation and your brand in Boston?
Well, I noticed that celebrities and well-liked speakers or people that are well-known increase attendees, better attendees. They give you better press. So that was my strategy at the beginning. What's the carrot I'm going to dangle to increase dollars, have better attendees? And that strategy always works. So that's what really made me successful. And that's how people, heard about me, was working through that particular strategy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Also, what about just the rate of change? I mean, setting aside COVID, the rate of change is just astronomical, and COVID just took it to a whole nother exponential level. And so to stay relevant is a challenge that we have in the industry. How do you feel about that? How to stay relevant for so many years?
Yeah, I mean, we did just that last year. Resilience. That was
That's a key word. Yeah.
That was my keyword last year.
Yeah.
And here's what I think. A lot of people think that the industry is going to change forever. It is to some extent, and it always, I guess, gradually changes. And I think we're going to see a gradual change because of the pandemic. Is it going to change and transform completely? No, I think that our events are going to go back to the way they were with some modifications, of course. But otherwise, I think that 2022 is it's going to be incredibly busy. Everyone always talks about the roaring, 20s and the roaring 22s. That is exactly what 2022 is going to look like. I hope we don't experience what we did at the beginning of this year, with an increased numbers of COVID again. I really hope it's going to fall off. But I think even if it does come back, I think we are going to, let's just say it does come back next year, and we are in the position we were earlier this year. I think that the spring, summer, and fall will be the same as this year, just increased numbers and in a safe way. And then in 2023 or whenever it does completely fall off, we will be back to where we are. When I know in our market in New England, as soon as everything opened up, everybody was right away, okay, I want to do events for 3,000 people or, 10,000 or what have you. They were already anxiously waiting to come back again. So that will happen and our industry will come back. And I know a lot of people are working extremely hard because they're planning 2 events. It feels like they're planning 2 events at once, but we will come back and it will get, easier.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. So just a couple more questions. If you were giving a masterclass to, let's say a group of really pretty experienced planners, designers on the wedding side, and let's say that they want to expand on the gala side, not just corporate events, but, fundraising events, and get to the level you're at, which is super high level. We've already gone through some definite tips and advice, but is there anything in particular that you would focus on? Again, this is for a wedding planner, producer who wants to really break big time into the gala market. What are some of the key things you would advise them?
Well, they have to know fundraising. And they have to know how to fundraise, what lures people, especially for night of fundraising. And you have to make sure that you're bringing something completely different to an event because you're competing against a lot of other fundraisers. Right. Yeah. So that's the magic in what you're doing. So it's a lot of marketing. It is a lot of strategy and fundraising. So get to know how to fundraise, and I think that will separate you from the rest. If you just want to get into it and design galas, that's fine too. But you'll be even more successful if you really understand the ins and outs of a nonprofit and how they fundraise.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And just lastly, so how do you, AJ, how do you define success for yourself? What does that mean to you these days?
Well, success is praise after an event or during the event. That is the most important to me. That's really success. I love, being on cloud nine after an event. That's the most amazing feeling.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely is. Well, I thank you for taking your time to do this. I think what you're doing is so interesting, and I missed the galas. I haven't personally done a lot of fundraisers lately, but when they come about, I feel like that's such a chance for me to be, on the entertainment side, to be really creative. And I think of it like you do, in terms of what, even from an entertainment perspective, what can I do that's going to basically help them to raise more money, And I mean, that could be like there's going to be a live auction, and maybe the band can perform some kind of a super moving song that even gets people to cry, like right before, so that they're going to give more with their money. Like, that's how I think. So
Right. It's a production. It completely is a production. You're pulling at the heartstrings. You're creating that emotion while creating energy at the same time. And you have to know when to create the energy and when to take it back and be serious about the cause. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Well, all right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with AJ Williams. Be sure to check out the website of her company, which is ajwevents.com. Again, ajwevents.com. Her social media handles on Instagram and Facebook is AJW Events. You can get all of this in the show notes at our website of theweddingbiz.com. And I want to mention that next week there will be no episode in honor of the holidays. I'm going to take a break and we'll return on Monday the 3rd. We'll catch you then on The Wedding Biz.